Hi and welcome back. In doing philosophy of AI, we would really be remiss not to include a series of questions that arise at the intersection of philosophy and the large language model, the LLM discourse. In this video, I will try to offer just the highlights of what this discussion looks like, and I will point to some specific questions that appear as we try to look at how this technology has been evolving and what problems is reviving from essentially the history of philosophy from its longer and also most recent past. And in doing so, we should be thinking about very specific classic debates that have concerned philosophers for a very long time. And you will find this discussion very analytically in this paper by two philosophers, Millière and Buckner. This paper has two parts, and it is aimed exactly to be this philosophical introduction to language models. And it's doing a very good job addressing all these issues that arise as we try to study LLMs from a philosophical point of view and exactly understand why this technology is very likely to be different from other AI systems we've had in the past. So, back to these questions, you'll see in the paper that the first problem that appears is something about language is going to be very important. Something about what meaning is and whether LLMs can have meaning. You'll often hear, oh, they're just doing next token prediction. They're just doing matrix multiplications internally in their transformer architecture. But one may want to ask, why would that be preventing them from having meaning? What are the conditions that we're seeking in establishing meaning? So semantics, meaning, philosophy of language. Then this question about compositionality. How does language exactly emerge in thinking? And how does thinking in reverse emerge out of linguistic features, which is composition, syntax, and semantics? And you'll see that this has been a long-standing debate in the philosophy of mind, language, and cognitive science, very prominently Fodor in 1975, and many other papers that ever since have been trying to make sense of what this compositionality is. Is there a language of thought? How do we think exactly? How do we represent our thoughts? And why is language potentially very crucial to thought representation? Now, another problem that you may have heard of, the problem of induction, essentially in thinking about the future. Is it safe and good to be going from many examples and generalizing? Is this a secure way of predicting the future? And whether systems like LLMs are exactly capable of generalizing, like they can read a lot of examples, they can infer from having seen many examples of one problem, and they can go into a new environment and they can generalize, which means that they can perform the same task under different conditions in a new context. And human beings can do that. They don't need to learn, they don't need to memorize how to behave in every single instance. What they do instead is they learn the skill, they learn the general capability. And then they can go and do whatever is needed depending on the context. Another problem is the discussion about innateness. Is language innate? Is it something that's being learned? What kind of environmental stimuli is necessary for language to arise, to be triggered, maybe? And from there, you may have heard about Noam Chomsky and the problem of having a universal grammar that maybe just resides within the language user, and so it becomes discovered in a sense rather than learned. This is the problem of innateness. And finally, if you have systems like LLMs that only interact with linguistic content, that only interact with text, how can you expect them to be able to model the world? And as we've seen now, experimenting with LLMs, these systems do have world models. They know where different countries are on the map. However, they have never interacted directly with our physical environment. So what does this look like? What does it look like for an agent to model its world and its environment? So these are only some of the questions that appear in the paper. So it would be very good for you to go back here and read it more carefully and try to zoom into the questions that seem as more central or potentially could create a thread, so that you have a better sense of why we're so concerned about the nature of these systems, what kind of debates have they sparked, why some philosophers disagree so much. And you see here, of course, the paper is before the most recent development, so we're talking about GPT-4 here, but the questions are the same even for those slightly less capable systems, and it's a very rich paper in really trying to ask very specific questions. So you see here some of the historical foundations, as we mentioned before, the Noam Chomsky discussion about how natural language is acquired. Where do we find natural language? And you'll see that it's very detailed and also very much attached to the actual technical side of how LLMs work and what is their architecture. So that's very helpful for you to do while or after having read the LLM transformer architecture resources and having watched the structure of the LLM video. So this is a very helpful paper to give you the philosophical context. I'm just going through the whole paper as you may be able to see some of the points that I brought up earlier, and in particular zoom into the section and try to understand why we're so concerned and why this is no trivial task to just determine what these systems are doing and how they're doing it, and why philosophers have so much to say about this, and how it could potentially even change the way we understand many of these philosophical debates, as this is evidence for how brains and minds work in the real world. So for example, some of the cases of this is innate. It cannot happen otherwise if you don't have the internal grammar. This potentially could be a counter argument that no, these systems learn it. So maybe this is an argument in favor of some kind of blank slate argument. And this perhaps gives points to the empiricists, as you'll see in the history of philosophy, that there's no innate, given, predetermined knowledge absolutely necessary for the linguistic capability. So this is the kind of argument, counter-argument you will find. And again, it's very important because this is happening right now, and this is empirical evidence that can be used in analytic philosophy and in trying to make some progress on these very, very important problems that have been around for a very long time.